Ladies and gentlemen, valued members, honored guests, welcome to the 2021 Virtual Legislative Summit, hosted by your United States Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, policy that powers America's Hispanic business. This summit offers a unique bipartisan opportunity to connect with decision makers and influence policy that will help our economy grow, while at the same time offering intimate panel discussions that can help our businesses scale and thrive. Today, we will hear from U.S. Hispanic Chamber of Commerce President and CEO Ramiro Cavazos and Chairwoman of the Board, Alice Rodriguez. We'll get an update on the state of Latino entrepreneurship from Latino Business Action Network Chairman of the Board, Victor Arias. We'll also hear from key members of the President's Cabinet, including Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, SBA Administrator Isabela Casillas Guzman, plus honorable members of Congress, including Congresswoman Nidia Velázquez, Congressman Raul Ruiz, Senator Alex Padilla, and Senator Tim Kaine. We'll conclude our program with remarks from the 46th President of the United States of America, the Honorable Joseph R. Biden, Jr. But before we begin, please welcome to sing the national anthem, vocalist and friend of the USHCC, Tony Jordan.
Coming to you from White Sands, New Mexico. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hail at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave? Oh, the land of the free and the home of the brave.
Colleagues and friends, members and distinguished guests, working to grow America's economy by supporting small, minority, and women-owned businesses for more than 3 decades, he led America's first Hispanic chamber in the country in San Antonio, Texas for over a decade before taking the helm of your United States Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. Please welcome President and CEO Ramiro Cavazos.
Welcome and bienvenidos to everyone. The United States Hispanic Chamber of Commerce is proud to present our 2021 Legislative Summit. This year marks our first virtual Legislative Summit, an online gathering of our nation's champions for small Latino and Latina-owned businesses. Thank you all for taking the time to tune in and take part in this powerful event. For the next 2 days, we'll be connecting America's Hispanic business leaders with our nation's top elected officials from both sides of the aisle, working to influence policies that will make our businesses and our nation's economy stronger, more resilient, and more equitable. Together, we'll explore innovative opportunities through public policy, procurement, advocacy, and access to technical assistance. The connections we make and strengthen during this year's summit will continue to illustrate to lawmakers and to America's largest corporations the vitality of Hispanic businesses to our country's present and future economic success. Because we are vital. Today's 61 million Latinos in the country, that's almost 19% of the entire U.S. population, account for more than $2.6 trillion in economic opportunity and impact. Latinos accounted for more than 80% of the growth in the United States labor force over the past decade. Before the pandemic, Latinos were launching new businesses at 3 times the rate of the national average. Latinas were launching their businesses at 6 times the national rate. We are entrepreneurs, we are workers, we are voters, we are consumers, we are Americans. But we also have been disproportionately affected by this pandemic. When lockdowns first began a year ago, 4/5 of our Latino workers held jobs that could not be done from home. Almost half reported losing work or taking a pay cut. A quarter of our Latino entrepreneurs reported shutting down their businesses temporarily or permanently. Latinos have always sacrificed. We've always been on the front lines. We believe that the time has come to shine a light on our contributions as a Latino community because we have shaped the world's largest economy for more than 300 years. Latinos have been 3 times as likely to test positively for the coronavirus, while experiencing more challenges accessing the needed health care. This inequity has meant Latinos have suffered 3 times the number of hospitalizations and more than twice the rate of deaths compared to non-Latinos in our country. Today, thankfully, we see the light at the end of the tunnel. Latinos have always prevailed. We've stayed resilient in the face of challenges over and over again. Already, more than half of Americans have received at least their first vaccine, and the United States Hispanic Chamber of Commerce is advocating for equitable access to vaccinations throughout the country for everyone. Part of our mission is to support Hispanic-owned and local Hispanic chambers as they work to rebuild our nation's many local economies. We endorse the American Rescue Plan because it will provide needed resources to working Americans, including more than 4.7 million Hispanic-owned businesses. Many of them are small mom-and-pop businesses, creating jobs, paying their taxes every day, providing needed services, and inspiring us with their strength. Before I speak further about the exciting opportunities ahead of us, I want to take just a moment to acknowledge the pain and suffering we've experienced. We've lost more than 500,000 Americans to the coronavirus. Family members, loved ones, friends, small businesses, our economic stability, our health. This past year has been incredibly difficult, and to heal, we must do it together and work together, listen to one another, lend a hand, and keep our hope alive. Our legislative summit is a tribute to each of you and your belief that hope will help us return to the quality of life that we want to have as soon as possible. We are close, so close to being able to resume life as we knew it. Let us continue to work together to achieve that moment. Speaking of strength, I am consistently humbled by the resilience within our community. Here at the U.S. Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, we witnessed a deep well of resources and perseverance as we help provide tangible support to America's Hispanic-owned businesses, which collectively contribute more than $800 billion to our economy each year. Thanks to the generous investments from many of our corporate leaders and our partners, including Cargill, Google, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, and many, many others, we were able to distribute thousands of economic relief grants directly to small businesses and directly to our local Hispanic chambers of commerce throughout the whole country. With a $1 million grant from the Minority Business Development Agency, we've also helped create 7 resource centers throughout the country, leveraging resources which provide technical assistance in both English and Spanish. It's known as USHCC Cares. The program continues to offer resources to businesses working hard to adapt to today's unique and ongoing challenges. In partnership with Telemundo and Comcast, we launched the Nuestros Negocios initiative to support Hispanic-owned small and medium-sized businesses across all 50 states, including Puerto Rico. The program provides resources, technology, guidance, and mentorship to businesses in the preferred language of their choice. While many of us have experienced the reality of Zoom fatigue over the past year, The ability to offer virtual support has also meant being able to expand our reach. Part of that has meant working to ensure access to broadband and Wi-Fi connectivity in our communities. The U.S. Hispanic Chamber has assisted with more than 10,000 technical assistance phone calls in both English and Spanish. We've held upwards of more than 150 national webinars, trainings, and workshops. We've created more than 100 new genuine strategic partnerships. We've added more than 20,000 new people and stakeholders to our email addresses to help strengthen our national network. Here, I must take a moment to recognize and thank our broad network of 260 local Hispanic chambers of commerce located around the country, from Honolulu to Rhode Island, from Seattle to Puerto Rico, from Wisconsin all the way to the Rio Grande Valley. Each local chamber serves as an important economic oasis to fortify America's Hispanic and minority-owned businesses. They're providing access to education, training, capital, networking, and contracting opportunities. To everyone attending our summit, I ask of you, if you're not already a member of your local Hispanic chamber, please consider joining. You will be amazed at the small business family that you will become a part of. To our corporate members that are joining us and our sponsors, I also ask you to consider joining your local Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, not just from a corporate social responsibility or diversity perspective, but because doing so makes good economic bottom line sense. Hispanics are your workforce. Hispanics are the largest, youngest, and fastest growing segment of our consumers for this country's economy. Hispanics are also your vendors, providing valuable and cost-efficient goods and services with excellence for your companies. The economic impact of our U.S. Latino community is larger than the entire economy of India, despite being less than 1/10 of the same population. Beyond that, corporate America must know that we want to be more than your workforce and your consumers. We want to be your vendors too, your advertisers, your caterers, your cybersecurity firms, your architects, your construction companies, your scientists. That's why we've made supply chain expansion and procurement one of the U.S. Hispanic Chamber of Commerce's top priorities. Toward that end, we have assembled a Procurement Council Advisory Board to advance the number of opportunities for Hispanic businesses within America's corporations, within government, with prime contractors and suppliers. This council is composed of members of major corporations from many industry sectors. They're leaders that are offering how-to advice. Many have decision-making authority and can influence the major corporations who are committing more spend with our Latino small business community than ever before. I also want to highlight two opportunities during this summit that will increase your understanding and access to procurement opportunities. The first is an outstanding panel scheduled later today, How Hispanic-Owned Businesses Can Succeed Through Federal Government Contracting. It will share the opportunity to learn how to do business with, quite frankly, the world's largest buying service in the world, the U.S. government, and it's more than $1.5 trillion in annual expenditures. The number one need for America's Latino and Latina-owned businesses is to secure more contracts and more business for their companies, to keep creating the jobs and expanding their markets to help the U.S. economy grow. That's why we're connecting hundreds of buyers and sellers with one another, from Fortune 1000 firms to procurement leaders from major government departments. We encourage you to sign up for this free virtual matchmaking opportunity during the summit. Pitch your business, introduce yourself, and give them the best of what you can provide to their company, and also to our federal agencies and corporations. These are commitments that increase spend with Hispanic businesses throughout the community through many industries of energy, telecom, financial services. If you haven't already registered for a match, do it now. The recovery of the U.S. economy needs you. It is these types of actionable offerings that make me so deeply proud of our National Board of Directors for both the United States Hispanic Chamber of Commerce and our Educational Fund. Thanks to their leadership and the work that we're all doing together, we are able to create opportunity for our members, for our economy, and a vision for our communities. That is why we also want to thank our hardworking and talented professional staff. Richard Garcia, Felipe Ugalde, Brianna Dimas, Fernando Mirson, Leroy Cavazos, Laura Sosa, Erica Salinas, Santiago Oliva, and Monica Garza. Thank you very much for your hard work. I also want to express my deep gratitude to our members, our Hispanic business enterprises, our corporate executives, and our Hispanic Chamber CEOs for their laser-focused commitment to build more wealth and prosperity for the Latino business community. More than anyone, I want to thank one individual in particular who has inspired us every day to be bold and raise the bar and utilize data to strengthen our ability to better serve our members. Knowing that America's future rests on the shoulders of Hispanic businesses and our ability to grow. Please join me in welcoming our next speaker, the chairwoman of our incredible board of directors. She's the head of community impact, the managing director at JP Morgan Chase & Company, Alice Rodriguez.
Thank you, Ramiro, for that very warm introduction. And thank you and the entire staff for all of your hard work supporting our Latino-owned businesses. I also want to take a minute to thank our Legislative Summit co-chairs, Nelson Ranieri and Jackie Puente. Your leadership and guidance has been invaluable, and for that I say thank you. Last year was an extraordinary year, a year of tragedy, a year of loss, a year of social injustice. But it was also a year of lots of lessons learned, lessons in resiliency, lessons in compassion, lessons in the human spirit. I have been on the board of the United States Hispanic Chamber of Commerce for 5 years, and I am proud to be your chairwoman. I'm also honored and proud to be represented with our board, our staff, and our local chambers. Together, we collaborated to ensure we did all we could do to help our Hispanic-owned businesses during the pandemic. Back in early 2019, before all the craziness began to happen, the board and I spent some time really getting grounded on the needs of our Hispanic-owned businesses. And we took that opportunity to tweak our vision statement and our mission statement. Our vision is to be the leading voice to advance Hispanic businesses to drive the American economy. Our mission is to build an ecosystem where Hispanic businesses can prosper and grow. You heard Ramiro talk about a lot of statistics, the $2.6 trillion that the Latino community has in terms of economic impact. You've also heard about the growth of the Latino population, currently 20% and growing. If you just pause and think about GDP, and that 70% of GDP is spending, Latinos will have an extraordinary impact over the next several decades. And we're starting to see that economy ramp up. We're not out of the woods by no means, but we are seeing some good signs, and we need to ensure that Latino-owned businesses are at the table. Ladies and gentlemen, it is no doubt, and there is no doubt in my mind, that the nearly 5 million Latino-owned businesses will have a very fundamental impact on rebuilding the economy. And that is why it's so important that at the USHCC, we advocate for all of these businesses. And the thing that we have heard time and time again from all of our Hispanic-owned businesses is we need information and we need access. And with those two things, we'll be able to drive the kind of growth that I know Hispanic-owned businesses can provide to this country. And that is why this legislative summit is so important. It's an opportunity to bring elected officials, researchers, business advocates, the people that can help with that information access. Officials like our very own SBA administrator, Isabela Guzman, or our Commerce Secretary, Gina Raimundo. We'll have the opportunity to hear from Chairwoman Maxine Waters and Nidia Velasquez on how we can collaborate together to come up with the right programs to drive that Hispanic growth. I know that your success is the nation's success. And there's no doubt in my mind that with the right people at the table, we can make this happen together. Now, you're about to hear the state of the Latino entrepreneurship from our very own board member, Victor Arias. But before we do that, let's take a minute to hear from our sponsors.
I'm originally from Venezuela. I came to Austin 2 years ago. I've always been an artist, but when I got here, I discovered wood burning. And as I started doing it more, I fell in love. And now I'm trying to grow my business and be able to share my art. Social media is where you can spread your work easier and broader to more people. So I started advertising my work on Facebook and on Instagram, and I started doing ads and everything, but I wasn't sure what to do. I was very confused. And when I got here to the workshop, I felt very welcome, and I felt like I saw a lot of other women like me going through the same situations like me. It felt really great. Kind of like a bond. It really is an amazing event because it makes you feel sort of empowered. You feel like, oh, now I know how to do this. Now I'm gonna go to Facebook and be able to do the ads myself and just grow my business. I hope that after this, my Palo y Fuego keeps growing. And I think with the tools that you guys gave me today, I think it will definitely help me.
This is more than an auto shop. These are experts people count on to keep moving. This is more than a bakery. It's a family tradition. Your small business means more than business to your community. So your hard work and perseverance deserves more support, like tips and resources to manage your money, partners to help you grow online, and contactless payments to keep you and everyone around you safer. That's a better normal.
2020 showed us what mattered most: connection to the people, places, and traditions we love. But for the almost 17 million kids who suddenly weren't able to connect, it also showed how much work needs to be done. That's why AT&T is helping to make sure students have access to the high-speed internet they need to learn. It's part of our $125 billion investment to connect America. Join AT&T, and together we can help connect students to brighter futures.
I've been homeschooling my girls for the past 5 years.
Since the pandemic started, I haven't been able to work my music, so I started doing DoorDash to pay some of my bills.
I really need the flexibility to be able to work around their schedule, and so I'm super thankful.
Thank you again.
Trabajamos arduamente a un ritmo sin precedentes, conectando a más personas en todo el país. Y ahora, nuestra red 5G es más grande y rápida. El trabajo arduo está dando frutos. Y recién empezamos.
This year's been tough, but I don't know, it's given me a lot of time to learn new skills through the internet.
I've been joining more classes during lockdown. I taught myself how to play guitar online.
I'm doing an internship.
I created a small nonprofit foundation.
So when people ask, how will I continue studying?
How are we going to do this online?
I feel like I'm ready.
I'm ready.
I'm ready for anything.
And now, a word from our signature sponsors at Comcast NBC Universal Telemundo.
My colleagues at Telemundo, NBC Universal, and Comcast are extremely proud to celebrate the one-year anniversary of Nuestros Negocios, a nationwide campaign we created in collaboration with the U.S. Hispanic Chamber of Commerce to support and spotlight small and medium-sized businesses impacted by COVID-19. During the past year, Telemundo's Nuestros Negocios initiative helped thousands of Hispanic-owned businesses. We connected them with experts, dedicated news reports, and online resources, and provided our platforms to help promote their services for them to remain in business. As we move forward, Telemundo continues its commitment and partnership with the U.S. Hispanic Chamber of Commerce to promote economic growth and development and provide resources to the more than 4.7 million Hispanic-owned businesses in the country. We continue on Nuestros Negocios efforts, working across our network, our Telemundo local stations, as well as our social and digital platforms to provide news, expert advice, and forums, as well as the most up-to-date information and resources in both Spanish and English. As the choice and voice of Latinos today, Telemundo takes its responsibility to serve and inform our community seriously. Once again, thank you to the U.S. Hispanic Chamber of Commerce for your partnership.
Hi, my name is Jackie Puente, and I'm the Executive Director for External Affairs at Comcast NBC Universal. And on behalf of Comcast, NBC Universal, Telemundo, and Sky's almost 200,000 employees worldwide, I'm honored to co-chair this year's United States Hispanic Chamber of Commerce's Legislative Summit. This summit is an important opportunity to share the USHCC's creative programming and bold advocacy agenda. And I want to thank everyone who has taken time out of their schedule, from their businesses and from their families, to come together and highlight members, identify business opportunities, and introduce elected and appointed policy leaders to the USHCC policy platform during the first 100 days of this new administration. I want to thank Board Chair Alice Rodriguez and President and CEO Ramiro Cavazos for their leadership and coolness under pressure. I'm so proud to serve on the board of directors, and I'm thankful for the opportunity to work with a dedicated team on some of the most pressing issues facing our community. In the throes of a global pandemic, economic crisis, natural disasters, and political and social turbulence, the USHCC community is banded together to mobilize Hispanic business leadership and advocate for policies to put us on the path to a more prosperous and equitable future. At Comcast NBC Universal, we're committed to our partnership with USHCC and to Hispanic business leaders as we deliver strategic programs to help those businesses hardest hit by COVID-19. First, we've created Comcast Rise. Comcast NBC Universal launched Rise as a part of our $100 million commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. We're offering grants, marketing resources, and technology updates to help businesses become more resilient, so they go from beyond bouncing back to bouncing forward. Secondly, Comcast, NBC Universal, and Telemundo is working on a multilingual nationwide awareness campaign called Plan Your Vaccine, or Planifica tu Vacuna, to let people know about where and how they can receive the COVID-19. This website, planyourvaccine.com, offers customizable state-by-state tool for news and data, letting users know if they are eligible for the vaccine, how they can track distribution timelines, and where the closest vaccination location is. Last but not least, we're doubling down on our commitment to digital equity with Internet Essentials. And you've heard me talk about this before, but in 10 years, we've connected more than 10 million low-income Americans to the internet. And we know that accessible and reliable internet is more critical now than ever before, especially in a climate of distance learning and telework. We're helping families receive increased speeds, unlimited data, and access to important digital skills and hardware across our country and across our footprint. Households qualify for IE if they're eligible for public assistance programs like the National School Lunch Program, Housing Assistance, Medicaid, SNAP, SSI, and other programs. To learn more about how we're bridging the digital divide, please visit www.internetessentials.com. These efforts will set the pace for better days ahead. I am so looking forward to the dialogue at this year's virtual summit, and I'm hopeful that we will continue our work together in person very soon. Have a great summit.
Honored guests and summit attendees, please welcome the chairman of the board of the Latino Business Action Network, Victor Arias.
Good morning, buenos dias to everybody. Thank you to all our sponsors for partnering with USHCC. And I'm proudly representing two high-impact American organizations. I'm privileged to sit on the board of the U.S. Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, which is led by our chairwoman, Alice Rodriguez, who you just saw. She's one of the wisest Latinas I have ever met. And our CEO, Ramiro Cavazos, the key driver who has brought rebirth to USHCC. I'm also proud to chair the Latino Business Action Network, LBAN, of which I, together with others, co-founded, including Professor Jerry Porras, who, among other notable accolades, co-authored the book Built to Last. Both USHCC and LBAN are catalysts for the new mainstream economy and support the key drivers of this U.S. economy, the Latino and Latina small business entrepreneurs. We're so happy to have Secretary Yellen and SBA Administrator Guzman, along with congressional leaders and President Joe Biden, to help push policy to keep building the important engine of the U.S. economy. On this first slide, you'll be able to see how LBAN collaborates with the Stanford Graduate School of Business to create the Stanford Latino Entrepreneurship Initiative. And SLAY, which is what we call it, focuses on three things: research on entrepreneurship and the success and challenges for Latino entrepreneurs. The second is education, which is a scaling program targeted to the top 3% of Latino businesses. And we have close to 750 alums from 31 states in Puerto Rico that have already shown great scaling success. And finally, supporting the ecosystem. We want to ensure that Latino businesses have the capacity and the capital to continue to create jobs, to create wealth, and to create leaders. And for those reasons, we are bona fide partners with USHCC. I'm here to talk about the latest research findings unveiled in late January at Stanford. And our team includes two top-notch researchers, Nora Tarek and Marlene Orozco, who work with Professor Paul Lawyer and Professor Jerry Porras. So let me share some comments about the research before I get into the results. This is our 6th annual study, and this one is the largest pool of respondents to date. Side-by-side comparison of Latino-owned businesses and white-owned businesses, which we have not ever done before. This is critical. We've also included network analysis for the first time on the ecosystem on work done by LBAN, by USHCC, other organizations, and our SLAY alums. We have to remind everybody that this survey was done amidst the pandemic, and we also took that opportunity to track some of the COVID impacts. And finally, this study is on employer-owned firms, unless we otherwise say, which means that employer-owned firms are at least one paid employee in addition to the owner. And so I want to take a look at this graph on some data and focus you on 3 lines. The first is the percent of US population, 61% are white, non-Hispanic, and 18% are Latino. The second line is the percent of all employer firms, 77% to 6% white to Latino. So that's a huge impact. And finally, the revenue, 11 trillion to 500 billion. And so this revenue the gap is huge. So if Latino-owned businesses had the same representation of employer firms as white-owned businesses, then the resulting revenues is defined as the opportunity gap. And it's been rising since 2012 to 2016, from 332 to 485. But for the first time, it decreased in 2017. That just means this is the revenue that we're sort of missing by not being at the same resulting, representation. So there's work to be done here. Let me tell you about the key findings that we've had. I'm going to show them all here because I'm going to go through each of those independently. Latino starting businesses at a faster rate than the national average in almost all industries and states. Number 2, that Latino-owned employer businesses are growing revenues at a faster rate. The third, that the odds of loan approval from national banks are 60% lower for Latino businesses compared to white owners. This is a big one. The fourth is that Latinas are the most negatively impacted by the pandemic. And the fifth is that Latino-owned employer businesses that participate in formal business organizations like USHCC are more likely to experience funding success. So let's take each one of these independently. Latino starting businesses at faster rates. Just so that you know, in the past 10 years, 34% growth for Latino businesses versus 1% for all others. But if that doesn't tell you what the impact is, then nothing else will. Let's look at this map of the growth rates by state. The shades of blue are growth and the red is decline. Latino businesses have experienced growth in 45 out of 50 states. 41 of those are higher than the national average. So just the impact of Latino businesses is incredible. Examples: North Carolina, 54%, Iowa, 58%, and Georgia, 30%, areas you might not otherwise have thought. Let's look at another chart about growth rate by industry. And everything above the line are those industries that are really growing. But let's take a look at the 5 biggest bubbles. And these are all in the non-service sector. And these are examples of those growth rates. Construction, 32%. Financing and insurance, 25%. Transportation and warehousing, 22%. Real estate, 22%. Administrative support and waste management, 22%. These are critical sectors for a post-COVID recovery. That's a really strong finding for the research we've done. The second point was about Latino-owned employer businesses and growing revenues at a faster rate. And we had not looked at that before, but that's pretty clear to us. In this graph, which is the CAGR rate, or the compound annual revenue growth rate, we see 5 years ago, it was there was very little difference in terms of that growth rate over 5 years. But over the last 2 years, Latino businesses have grown 25 to 19%. And on a CAGR basis, that's a really significant difference. So this is a strong finding for us as well. Sort of on the negative side of the ledger, we look at odds of loan approvals from national banks, which are the traditional access to capital for Latinos. And it's 60% lower approval rates for Latinos compared to white business owners. And so, these slides show some metrics as well. If we had focused, and we also in this research, we had also looked at controlling for those business metrics, business performance metrics, and these we show some of them. If we had controlled and focused strictly on scaled, high revenue growth, profitable and network businesses, approval rates from commercial banks are still very low for Latino businesses. And so this is a huge area of improvement that we need to focus in on. The fourth one is about Latinas being most negatively impacted. And if we look at Latina businesses, 2 times of Latina-led businesses experience closure versus all Latin-owned businesses. In the food services area, and that's the biggest bubble there, especially, 1 in 4 Latina businesses closed, and many have done so permanently. Also, another chart that just shows that Latinas took more of the COVID brunt, and it's just another finding we should be aware of as we go forward. Number 5, Latino-owned employer businesses that participate in formal business organizations are more likely to experience funding success. So supportive business organizations like USHCC within the ecosystem have had more contact with capital sources, especially during this pandemic and the relief programs that they brought with them. So this is also very important. This graph just shows that if you have organizational networks, the bars in the middle, compared to no networks, Latino businesses are 3 times more successful at finding success. So this is the kind of research that we do at Stanford, and it's very important. Please look at that QR code and scan it, or go to the website there to get your reports, and you can go back to the other reports that we've had. In summary, Latino-owned businesses continue to grow faster than anybody else. However, there's much more work to do. That includes access to capital, the ecosystem and network support, including certifications, among other things. On behalf of the LBAN and USHCC boards, thank you very much. So just know that Latina-owned businesses will continue to drive this U.S. economy, and that you can be sure of. Remember that your best contribution to the U.S. economy is to buy from Latino businesses and to get vaccinated. Adelante.
Thank you, Victor, for that very important readout. For all of the hardship that Latino-owned businesses have experienced, it's great to know that there's opportunity. And part of that opportunity comes from the new administration. The new administration recognizes the importance that Latino-owned and women-owned businesses play in the economic recovery. And that is why I am so thrilled to introduce our next guest. She really doesn't need any introduction. She is a distinguished economist, the first woman Secretary of Treasury, the first woman to chair the Federal Reserve, She is Professor Emeriti at the Haas School of Business at the University of California, Berkeley. She served on the Federal Reserve Board of Governors from 1994 to 1997, and again from 2010 to 2018. She is a distinguished fellow at the Brookings Institution and also served as the chair of the Economic Advisors during the Clinton administration. On a lighter note, she had her magical pop culture moment during her nomination, when then President-elect Joe Biden joked that Lin-Manuel Miranda should write a musical about the first woman secretary. NPR took that up and gave it a shot. The result, Who's Yelling Now became a magical hit on social media. Please, ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome the United States Secretary of Treasury, Janet Yellen.
Thank you, Alice, for the very kind introduction, and thank you all for having me. I've been an economist for a long time, and one area where I focused my attention is on the disparity in economic outcomes, especially when it comes to race and ethnicity. It's probably because I began studying the subject during the civil rights movement. I took my first economics course around 1963. I was a freshman in college. Since then, our country has endured at least 5 major economic crises. There was the oil crisis and the stagflation in the 70s, the double-dip recession of the early 80s, the burst of the dot-com bubble, and of course, the Great Recession beginning in 2008. Each of these crises was very different, but they all shared at least one significant characteristic. They all hit Latino Americans disproportionately hard. In fact, if you take the Hispanic unemployment rate over the past 50 years and superimpose it on top of the national average, what you see are 2 lines that move roughly in tandem, except the Hispanic unemployment rate is always above the national average. And when there's a crisis, both rates spike, but the Hispanic rate spikes much higher. Economic crises generally do this. They take pre-existing inequalities and make them even more unequal. To me, it's one of the most pernicious effects of a struggling economy, and it's something the president and I wanted to prevent from happening again. After all, the 5th crisis, the one I haven't mentioned yet, is the current one. It's the pandemic. If someone tried to design an economic crisis that would unduly target the Hispanic community, they'd probably come up with something that looks a lot like COVID-19. The 5 sectors the pandemic was most likely to slow or shut down accounted for 50% of revenues for Latino-owned businesses. They accounted for 65% of all Latino employment. As this organization knows far better than I do, there was immense pain, and it cascaded down into higher rates of joblessness, into more Hispanic families late on their mortgages and their rent, into hunger. 1 in 5 Latino households still say they don't have enough food to eat. When I took office, I looked at economic data like these, and I worried that many of these families would be haunted by the COVID economy long after the health emergency was over. We know that when the foundations of someone's life collapse, when they lose a small business or the ability to eat dinner every night, it can weigh them down permanently. Their ability to earn is forever lowered. It's a phenomenon called economic scarring, and I worried this would happen on a mass scale. That's why the president and I had been so insistent that we deliver more relief, and now we are. On March 11th, the president signed the American Rescue Plan into law. It's easily the most ambitious relief package since the Great Depression, and it includes a slate of programs that will help people make it to the other side of this pandemic. There's funding to immunize people, to help people with their rent and mortgages, and to send $1,400 checks to most families in the country. There are a lot of very tired Treasury employees who've spent much of the last 19 days and nights figuring out how to get this money out the door and doing so in a way that prioritizes the people who need it most. We've been very focused on that, and not just for programs in this rescue plan, but for all the pandemic relief programs that existed previously. The Paycheck Protection Program is probably the one you're most familiar with. PPP was supposed to be an early lifeline, but because of issues with the program's design, the first rounds often didn't reach the smallest businesses, which are disproportionately Hispanic-owned. We're addressing that now and tweaking how we implement the program. It's allowing us to reach millions more micro businesses and entrepreneurs, especially in rural and low-income areas. With the passage of the rescue plan, we will thankfully avoid economic scarring on a mass scale. At the end of the day, it will probably still be true that the pandemic economy followed the historic trend and hit the Hispanic community harder than many other groups. But when we look back at the data, I don't believe the effects will be as long-lasting as they would have otherwise. I think people will be ready to bounce back. In fact, I expect we'll be back at full employment by next year. And if history is any guide, Hispanic-owned businesses will drive a large portion of the recovery. From 2007 to 2012, years that roughly track the Great Recession and the immediate rebound, the number of Latino-owned businesses grew by 3.3%. Doesn't sound like much until you see that during the same period, non-Latino-owned businesses declined by 3.6%. And after 2012, the number of new Latino-owned businesses grew at more than twice the national average. I want you to know, I'm confident Hispanic entrepreneurs can lead us out of a crisis again. I know Hispanic workers can power our recovery, potentially in an even bigger way than a decade ago, so long as we remove some of the long-standing barriers that have been in your way. When it comes to the Hispanic community, there's such a frustrating irony in the historic data. On the one hand, this community outperforms in the creation of new businesses. On the other, you have less access to capital to create and grow them in the first place. One study looked at national banks and their loan approval rates for white and Latino-owned firms. The approval rate for Latino-owned companies was 60% lower. And that's even when controlling for how the business was performing. We know that Latinos, and especially Latinas, are overrepresented in the ranks of essential workers, the people who've kept our country afloat this past year. But we also know that support has not been returned in kind. Before the pandemic, Latinas accounted for 17% of the women in the labor force. Since the pandemic began, they've accounted for 27% of women who've left it. I believe a major cause is the burden of childcare. We need to unwind this frustrating irony. We need to give you the support you need. We've begun to do some of this. The American Rescue Plan, for example, includes funding so essential workers can pay for childcare. And at Treasury, we're gearing up to inject $12 billion into community development financial institutions and minority depository institutions. It's more money than has flowed through these programs since their creation in the 90s. And I think it will make a meaningful difference in the ability of Latino-owned firms to access capital. But this is just a start, and I need your help. I think this speech probably demonstrated that we have access to some very detailed economic data at Treasury, but there's no replacement for the deep personal knowledge you have. You know what it feels like to open shop and scale up in your communities. We need to understand that too. Good policymaking requires that we understand the humanity beneath the data, and I'm hoping you can help us there. I've been holding virtual roundtables with all sorts of business-related groups since taking office. It's something my team and I are going to continue to do. So please come. Tell us your challenges. Tell us where we can do better, how we can clarify guidance or provide technical assistance. If we work together, then I'm confident that when someone looks back at the economic data around the pandemic, they won't simply conclude that Hispanic workers and businesses were the victim of the 2020 economy. They'll see that they were builders of a better one in 2021 and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Yellen, for those valuable remarks. The USHCC looks forward to our working relationship with the U.S. Department of the Treasury. My name is Rosa Santana, and I am the founder and president of the Santana Group. As a Latina business owner and thriving entrepreneur, it is my honor today in my role as a USHCC Executive Board member to introduce U.S. SBA Administrator Isabela Casillas Guzman. I had the pleasure of participating on a panel organized by the SBA in honor of Women's History Month. Administrator Guzman, among the many projects she's overseen to ensure small businesses not only survive the pandemic, but also thrive, made the time to personally attend and provide remarks, just as she's about to do here at the USHCC. Her passion for the success of small business owners is evident. A former small business entrepreneur herself, Administrator Guzman's service and advocacy comes from a place of true empathy and passion. Administrator Guzman served as the director of the California Office of the Small Business Advocate, a position for which she was appointed by Governor Gavin Newsom in April 2019. In that role, she served as a voice of small businesses and innovative startups in the fifth largest economy in the world. She administered and advocated for programs and initiatives to help small businesses access capital, markets, and networks for stronger outcomes. She and her team helped connect entrepreneurs in every community with the resources they needed. As the Economic Recovery Support Function Coordinator for the state, she focused on resilience and most recently worked to help small businesses access relief during the COVID-19 pandemic, leading to the expansion of state-supported lending and the largest COVID-19 grant relief program in the nation at over $2.5 billion. Administrator Guzman has previously served in leadership at the SBA as the agency's Deputy Chief of Staff and Senior Advisor during the Obama-Biden administration, where she oversaw policy and new program implementation. Today, as a 27th Administrator of the SBA, Administrator Guzman represents the more than 30 million U.S. small businesses, and I know small business owners like myself are in great hands. Ladies and gentlemen, U.S. SBA Administrator Isabela Casillas Guzman. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Rosa, for that warm introduction. I am so proud of your successes selling to some of the world's leading companies. It's wonderful to be with you again here at USHCC's Legislative Conference. I was honored to have you join us last week for SBA's own Women's History Month event. You are a trailblazer for women and Hispanic small businesses alike, as well as, frankly, all aspiring suppliers. And it's fitting that you introduced me here today to continue our work together as advocates for our nation's 4.7 million Hispanic-owned small businesses. I'd also like to take this moment to thank Ramiro Cavazos, USHCC's fearless CEO, for his continuing commitment to the SBA and our nation's small businesses. And to all of USHCC's incredible board leaders, Congressman Ruiz and Board Chair Alice Rodriguez, thank you for the work you do to shepherd the more than 250 Hispanic chambers of commerce across the country that have continued to provide vital assistance throughout this pandemic. I was sworn in as the SBA administrator almost 2 weeks ago, and I couldn't think of a better crowd for my first major address than right here with my Latino familia, the USHCC. I come from a small business family. I grew up watching my father work day in and day out, wearing multiple hats to build his chain of veterinary practices. I've worked with numerous founders and started my own businesses as well. So I understand the grit, determination, resilience, and hard work it takes to start, grow, and sustain a small business. I recognize how important small businesses are to the communities they serve and the people they employ. I carry those experiences with me today as the voice for America's small businesses at the SBA. I don't have to tell you that these are challenging times for Hispanic entrepreneurs, and you heard the data. You've seen with your own eyes how hard the Latino community has been hit by the pandemic. And the data is stark that 32% of Latino-owned businesses closed in just 3 months in 2020, and that was almost double the number of white-owned businesses that closed in the same period. Those are devastating statistics. But I'm here today to tell you that the help is here. Let me say that again, la ayuda está aquí. Earlier this month, President Biden signed into law the American Rescue Plan. This $1.9 trillion relief package promises to change the course of the pandemic's economic crisis with new programs that will provide billions in targeted assistance. Help is here at the SBA for the smallest and most severely impacted small businesses. With our $15 billion in flexible disaster program grants. Help is here for our food service businesses with the $29 billion Restaurant Revitalization Fund grant program. Help is here through an increase of the Shuttered Venue Operators grant program. Help is here with the Community Navigator pilot program that will increase resource and service delivery of SBA's COVID relief programs to small businesses. Think of it like a Prometora network for small businesses. Grassroots, hyperlocal, to ensure our underserved small businesses can connect to resources, as not everyone has the networks needed, and every small business owner needs a team. And help is here with more Paycheck Protection Program loans. In fact, I'm headed to the White House after I wrap up here to join President Biden and Vice President Harris as the president authorizes the extension of the PPP that Congress passed, so that we can continue to get funds to those small businesses who have not yet been able to access relief. With the PPP extension, we will help ensure those funds go where they are needed most. Thanks to important changes implemented at SBA by the Biden administration, the smallest businesses, our sole proprietors, our self-employed and independent contractors will receive more support. Entrepreneurs with non-fraud felony convictions can access the program. Delinquency or default on federal student loan debt is no longer disqualifying, and non-citizen small business owners who are lawful U.S. residents now have clarity that they can use their individual taxpayer identification number, or the I-10, to apply for the PPP. La ayuda está aquí para todos. The American Rescue Plan will deliver immediate relief for hard-hit Latino families and small businesses. It will build a bridge toward economic recovery and reduce poverty in the Latino communities by almost 40%. Now I know that you'll be hearing from President Biden in a moment, but first I must share with you one of my many reasons why I'm so excited to be serving in his administration. Our president is truly committed in words and in actions to building equitable economic recovery for every small business owner in America. My passion and my commitment. For far too long, Latino-owned businesses have been held back by an opportunity gap that has only grown wider during this pandemic. Yet as the fastest growing business segment in the United States, as we've just heard, Latino-owned businesses are critical to the future of the U.S. economy. The Biden-Harris administration is committed to closing that gap and unleashing that potential. As administrator of the SBA, I will do everything I can to carry out that commitment by focusing on increasing access to capital for Latino-owned businesses, better leveraging SBA's critical capital programs to serve all of our entrepreneurs, and focusing on access to markets. We can't forget the revenue side of the equation. We want you to know that the federal marketplace, with its $539 billion eligible for small business contracting, is here to do business with Latino businesses. And I will help small businesses grow by working diligently to deliver on President Biden's pledge to increase the 5% small disadvantaged business contracting goal to 15% by 2025. That could mean billions of dollars in the hands of minority-owned businesses. That commitment is real, and it's going to bring the economic engine that powers our economy, our America's small businesses, roaring back. SBA is focused on bringing businesses back, creating jobs, and achieving equity across the entrepreneurial ecosystems that it supports. And I'm committed to building an SBA that is as entrepreneurial as the entrepreneurs we serve. Since this pandemic began, we've been asking our entrepreneurs to pivot and adapt to the new COVID-19 marketplace. If the SBA is going to meet the needs of our nation's small businesses, then we must meet our small businesses and the diversity they represent where they are by pivoting and adapting ourselves. The SBA has grown from $1 billion agency to one responsible for over $1 trillion in relief funding. We're working with more lenders, a larger portfolio, increased direct lending and grants, and heightened demand and awareness of our services. How we pivot and grow will determine not only our future, but the future of our emerging entrepreneurs and America's economy. That means looking at all of our programs through an inclusive lens, focusing on customer-centric design, empowering the SBA with technology to make sure we are building an ecosystem that works for everyone and meets them where they are. I want small businesses to feel like the giants that they are in our economy, and I'm committed to the hard work, creativity, effective management, and oversight, and collaboration that it will take to build a better SBA to help make more dreams come true for America's entrepreneurs. Their successes, your successes, are how we rebuild an economy that works for everyone. So I look forward to working together with all of you at USHCC and beyond to ensure our nation's Hispanic small businesses not only thrive, but become the driving force our economy needs to build back better. Adelante. Gracias muchísimo.
Thank you, Administrator Guzman. Now, valued members and honored guests, please welcome the first Puerto Rican woman to serve in Congress, United States Congresswoman Nidia Velázquez.
Hello. Thank you so much for inviting me to join you today for your legislative summit. I have served as the leading Democrat on the House Small Business Committee for over 20 years. During my tenure, Hispanic business owners and entrepreneurs have made outstanding progress in this country. Today, Latino business owners are a dynamic force, starting businesses at 3 times the rate of any other group in the U.S. Despite all the gains that these businesses have made, 2020 delivered substantial setbacks. Between February and April last year, the pandemic closed 32% of Latino-owned businesses. For the past year, I have worked alongside organizations like USHCC to make federal programs more equitable and ensure that Latino business owners were not left behind. As committee chairwoman, I have worked to pass multiple bills to empower the community financial institutions that Hispanic businesses often rely on. Program data shows that these changes substantially improve emergency lending to businesses owned by underserved groups. I also worked with the Biden administration to institute a series of reforms to get more aid to the smallest of small businesses and those owned by people of color. According to the administration, these reforms have resulted in a 20% increase in loans approved to minority-owned businesses. This progress shows that if we want to achieve an equitable recovery from COVID, we must prioritize those small businesses that have previously been ignored. Once we crush this virus for good, we must turn to achieving long-term prosperity for Latino businesses. That is why my staff and I are working to advance policies that help create a business environment where Latino entrepreneurs can access affordable capital. We are doing this by empowering community lenders and strengthening the SBA programs that target underserved businesses. It is also vital that Latino small businesses have ample access to federal contracting opportunities. The U.S. government is the largest purchaser of goods and services in the world. The SBA has instituted government-wide contracting goals that require federal agencies to award a certain percentage of contracts to underserved groups. On my committee, I'm working to ensure these goals are met and that Latino entrepreneurs have ample access to this key market. If we want our country to make a full recovery, we need businesses like yours operating at full strength. I am so grateful for organizations like USHCC for all that you do in advancing the interests of Latino-owned businesses. Thank you again for having me today. I wish you a productive legislative summit.
Collaboration is key. Thank you, Representative Velasquez. Now, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome U.S. Representative for California's 36th Congressional District and Chairman of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, the Honorable Raul Ruiz.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me today. My name is Congressman Dr. Raul Ruiz. I represent California's 36th Congressional District in Eastern Riverside County, the Coachella Valley area in Southern California. I'm an emergency medicine physician and a public health expert with training in humanitarian and disaster aid. I'm also the chair of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus. It is a pleasure to be with you all today at the 2021 U.S. Hispanic Chamber of Commerce Legislative Summit entitled Policy That Powers America's Hispanic Business, as we discuss America's business future. I would like to start off by thanking the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce for their leadership and work in actively promoting economic growth, development, and the interest of the more than 4.7 million Hispanic-owned businesses that together contribute over $800 billion to the American economy every year. The COVID-19 pandemic has taken a toll on our community and has disproportionately affected Hispanic and minority-owned businesses. Hispanics play a central role in the U.S. economy, especially as essential workers, oftentimes high-risk essential workers and workers in industries hit hardest by the pandemic. Because of persistent systemic barriers and inequities in the labor market, Hispanic Americans face one of the highest unemployment rates in the country, with Latinas disproportionately affected. In December, 9% of Hispanic workers, 2.7 million people, were unemployed. As chair of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, I can assure you that all 38 members of the caucus are working tirelessly with the Biden administration and congressional leadership to ensure the needs of Hispanic families, workers, and business owners are prioritized in legislation that is signed into law. The Congressional Hispanic Caucus is proud to have 34 members in the U.S. House of Representatives and 4 U.S. senators, including our newest CHC member, Senator Alex Padilla from California, who is a champion for our essential workers and for the Hispanic community. The Congressional Hispanic Caucus pushed hard and made it a top priority for the appointment of a Latina to President Biden's cabinet. And I'm proud that Isabel Guzman has been sworn in as administrator of the Small Business Administration and is already working hard at work to build back better. Un orgullo. Having a Latina at the table who is a small business entrepreneur herself and who has previously worked at the SBA is essential to helping bridge the gap among minority business owners and federal assistance. The CHC looks forward to working with Administrator Guzman and Small Business Committee Chairwoman and CHC member Nidia Velasquez to ensure equity-driven policies are enacted so that minority business owners are aware of and have access to the resources needed to recover from the pandemic and succeed for years to come. The CHC is proud to have unanimously supported the passage of the American Rescue Plan, which ensures that millions of Hispanic families will receive the help they desperately need through money in consumers' pockets, people in jobs, and assistance for small businesses. The American Rescue Plan provides support for communities that are struggling in the wake of COVID-19 by providing emergency grants, lending, and investment to hard-hit small businesses, especially Hispanic-owned businesses. It also delivers emergency relief to working families bearing the brunt of the COVID-19 crisis. The American Rescue Plan gives working families a $1,400 per person check, helping Hispanic families who have been hardest hit financially by the crisis. It extends current unemployment insurance benefits and eligibility and provides a $300 federal supplemental per week on top of the state aid until the end of September, supporting the 1 in 11 Hispanic workers who are currently unemployed. The American Rescue Plan will help put our nation on a speedier, more equitable path to recovery for everyone. This Congress, CAC will continue to push for PPP funding for small businesses with 10 or fewer employees to prioritize assistance for community small businesses hardest hurt by the pandemic. We are also advocating for additional funding for economic injury disaster loans and EIDL emergency grants, key programs that support businesses with limited access to credit and provide a critical lifeline to small business owners in need. And finally, we are advocating for increased funding for the strengthened SBA loan programs and waivers extended for principal and interest payments to reduce the burden of small businesses and help them fully recover from the financial crisis. The CAC is committed to continuing to lift the barriers and systemic inequalities Hispanic families face and deliver progress for our communities. And we look forward to continuing to work with our colleagues in Congress, as well as President Biden and Vice President Harris in their first 100 days and beyond. Hispanic families, as I mentioned, have bared the brunt of the COVID-19 pandemic, not only because of the disproportionate burden of disease of COVID-19. Hispanic families we've seen have the highest risk of getting infected, infecting their families and their community, and also dying from COVID-19. And oftentimes it's because of overcrowded housing and working in high-risk essential jobs, essentially continuing the function of our country, especially our farm workers who are out there day in and day out, literally dying in order to feed America. And so we owe our essential workers a great deal of gratitude. We owe our small businesses who have stretched their pockets thin to ensure their employees are still employed, because in a small business done right, son familia. And an owner and a worker together as family can ensure the value of that small business can continue for the community. And oftentimes those businesses are a symbol of the community that bring people together. They're known and a pride of a community, especially in small Latino communities. And so we appreciate small business owners. We appreciate the work and the sacrifice that you have done. And as Administrator Guzman said, la ayuda está aquí. The help has arrived. And together we can endure this pandemic. We can become resilient, and we will not just survive through this pandemic, but we will thrive through this pandemic, and we will build back better, in the words of President Biden. So I thank you. I thank the work that the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce does for strengthening and empowering Hispanic communities in economic growth and development. Together, we can advance public policy that creates lasting changes to ensure the promise of America is accessible to the 60 million Hispanics living across our country. Thank you.
Honored guests and summit attendees, please welcome former California Secretary of State and now United States Senator representing California, the Honorable Alex Padilla.
Hi, I'm Senator Alex Padilla, and I'm proud to be the first Latino to represent California in the United States Senate. And I thank you for inviting me to join you today. Now, while I may be a new United States Senator, I am not new to working with the Chamber. We've partnered throughout my career in public service, from my days as a member of the Los Angeles City Council to my time in the California State Senate and as California Secretary of State. So I look forward to continuing to work with you, but this time to expand opportunities for our Latino entrepreneurs throughout the country. Now, in my first 2 months in the Senate, I've been proud to support 3 California Latino appointees to President Biden's cabinet. Javier Becerra as Secretary of Health and Human Services, Alejandro Mayorkas as Secretary of Homeland Security, and Isabel Guzman as SBA Administrator. I'm also proud to have voted for the American Rescue Plan, which is delivering critical relief to American businesses and families as we work to overcome the COVID-19 pandemic. The American Rescue Plan includes $15 billion for grants to small businesses in low-income communities that have been most affected by the pandemic. $175 million to help small businesses in underserved and underbanked communities access to COVID-19 relief resources available to them. And historic expansions in the child and earned income tax credits that are estimated to benefit nearly 4.7 million Latino children and 700,000 low-income Latino workers without children in California alone. The American Rescue Plan is a first major step in helping our nation recover from this crisis. The recovery must include equitable economic and public health outcomes across communities, and it will not be successful if assistance fails to reach Latinos. That's why I'm working with administration officials to improve vaccine distribution, particularly for communities of color. To address pervasive and historic barriers to business ownership, I've teamed up with Senator Cardin to introduce the Minority Business Resiliency Act. This bill would codify the Minority Business Development Agency and provide it with the resources it needs to help minority entrepreneurs start and grow successful businesses. Now, greater corporate diversity will also unlock opportunity for most underrepresented communities, making our whole economy stronger. Our economy works best when it's inclusive, from entry-level jobs to the corporate boardrooms. So I'm proud to also co-sponsor Senator Menendez's legislation to help us get there, and we appreciate the Chamber's support. We've seen how California's inclusivity and diversity has helped foster some of the most innovative companies in the world. And it's time for corporate America to deliver on commitments to increase diversity in leadership positions. Finally, as a member of the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee, I'm working with my colleagues to develop a long overdue, comprehensive, and inclusive infrastructure package. We have a real opportunity to invest in projects that will provide good paying jobs and improve our communities by increasing access to resources like workforce training and broadband. As you can see, we have a lot of work to do. But I thank you again for inviting me to speak with you as you continue to advocate for our community. Please continue to stay safe.
Thank you, Senator Padilla. Now, representing the great state of Virginia, United States Senator, the Honorable Tim Kaine.
Hey everybody, Senator Tim Kaine here. Thanks for inviting me to speak today. Nuestra comunidad hispana plays a critical role in strengthening Virginia's economy and will be absolutely vital to the Commonwealth's recovery from COVID-19. Of course, our Hispanic community has been disproportionately impacted by COVID-19, accounting for about 45% of COVID-19 cases in Virginia, despite Latinos making up only about 10% of our population. Sectors with disproportionate shares of Hispanic-owned businesses are among those hardest hit by the pandemic. We also know that pre-existing gaps in income, wealth, access to financial services, access to healthcare and childcare, and other disparities have contributed to minorities and minority-owned businesses suffering from the pandemic to a significantly greater degree than their white counterparts. So I've been working to more meaningfully address these disparities in Congress. Last year, we saw that minority-owned small businesses and communities of color had unequal access to the first round of PPP loans. partially because of disparities in pre-existing relationships with financial institutions and access to the other entities and agencies that help businesses become aware of and apply for relief. So when we went back to add more funding to PPP last April, Democrats ensured that banks better poised to serve underserved businesses had equal access to funding. We also provided historic amounts of funding for community development financial institutions and minority depository institutions in the COVID relief bill we passed in December. The American Rescue Plan that President Biden signed into law earlier this month is a bold continuation of relief efforts that will change the lives of millions of Virginia families, workers, and small businesses. It provides millions of Virginians, 84% of our population, with stimulus checks and unemployment benefits through the summer. Because of this bill, just in Virginia, 85,000 children will be lifted out of poverty because of the enhanced earned income and child tax credits. Expanding these tax credits will also have a close effect on closing racial disparities in poverty rates, and we'll need to work to make those reforms permanent. In addition to providing additional funding to expand access to PPP, the bill creates a $25 billion restaurant revitalization fund to provide grants for restaurants and food service companies. It adds $15 billion for the EIDL Advanced Loan Program through the SBA to provide grant funding to our hardest hit small businesses. And it creates a new Community Navigator program to enhance outreach to underserved communities nationwide. Finally, the American Rescue Plan includes vital investments to help distribute vaccines, funding for childcare to provide struggling families with childcare services, and funding to help our schools and universities safely reopen. Okay, but there's more to do, and now we have to work to ensure that the provisions in the bill are implemented swiftly and fairly so that all communities, but especially our Hispanic community and others that have been hit so hard by pandemic, are able to survive this pandemic, climb out of the economic catastrophe we've been in, and thrive in an economic recovery that leads us to a more robust and equitable and sustainable economy. Once we get through the pandemic, we've got to get the economy back on track, but also address pre-existing problems that prevented the economy from working for everybody. So we'll be focused on job creation, including investing in infrastructure, housing, clean energy. And as part of this, we need to be thinking through ways to expand economic opportunities for all Americans, especially our communities such as the Latino community, which has been such a source of strength for Virginia. I always point out that when I was born in 1958, 1 out of every 100 Virginians was born in another country, and we were poor. Our state was bottom quarter of per capita income in the United States. Today, we're 1 out of 9 Virginians are born in another country with a sizable and growing Latino population. And guess what? Now we're top 15 per capita income. As we have become more diverse, as the percentage of new Americans has grown, as our Hispanic community has grown, Virginia has gone from back of the pack to front of the pack economically. You cannot tell me that our Hispanic community or our new Americans more generally have not been anything but a great benefit to Virginia. You are a source of richness and strength to our Commonwealth and our country, and I want to thank you. And I especially want to thank the Cámara de Comercio Hispana for all the work you're doing, and I look forward to working with you more in the future.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back our host, the United States Hispanic Chamber of Commerce's very own President and CEO, Ramiro Cavazos.
Thank you. It is my distinct honor to introduce to you our 46th President of the United States. President Joe Biden has spent almost half a century serving the American people and has taken the helm of this country during one of its darkest hours. In his inaugural address, President Biden acknowledged the cascade of crises that we're facing as a country. More than 500,000 American lives lost to the pandemic, an economy in the midst of a recession, families and small businesses that are struggling, and an unfinished national reckoning over needed diversity, equity, and inclusion. Americans need economic relief and reliable and stable political leadership now more than ever. The United States Hispanic Chamber of Commerce has endorsed the American Rescue Plan Act, which provides $1.9 trillion to help our working people and families receive the direct assistance that they need. It provides support for vaccine distribution, school reopenings, small business grants through the Paycheck Protection Program, unemployment assistance, health benefits, and stimulus checks that are landing in bank accounts across the country. We look forward to working with the new administration and having an active seat at the table to ensure that the Latino business community is front and center where decisions are being made. It is now my highest privilege to introduce the President of the United States, the Honorable Joseph R. Biden, Jr.
Hello, everyone. It's an honor to be with you. I want to thank you for shining a light on the contributions and the struggles of Latino-owned businesses. The U.S. Latino market is a pillar of the U.S. economy, measuring $2.6 trillion in a recent study, which would rank it as the 8th largest economy in the world. Latino-owned businesses are an important part of that story and the heart and soul of so many main streets across the country. But I know how hard it's been the last years. It isn't easy to hang a close sign on a dream or a family legacy that you poured your heart into building. But for too many Latino entrepreneurs and employees have lived that heartbreaking reality of putting up that close sign. When I took office back in January, I promised that help would be on the way. And today, help is here. The American Rescue Plan is already helping get Americans vaccinated and putting money directly into Americans' pockets. It's a big part of the law that's helping small businesses keep their doors open as well. There's a big chunk that just does that. It provides emergency support to rehire employees you've had to let go in tough times and to purchase supplies and equipment that you need to operate safely. The law includes a Small Business Opportunity Fund to infuse capital into neighborhoods that have been historically underserved by the federal government. And substantial grants, and I said that's grants, not loans, grants for mom and pop restaurants, food trucks, food stands, and other hard-hit establishments. We're also deploying community navigators to help connect small businesses with the relief programs so that folks without lawyers or bankers or consultants or accountants don't get left behind. The law is going to help a lot of Latino-owned businesses. The U.S. Hispanic Chamber of Commerce helped us fight for this law. Now we're going to fight for you. We know that Latinos have historically faced discrimination when it comes to securing support for their businesses. But my administration, I promise you, is going to stand with you to invest in Latino-owned businesses and rebuild, in the consequence, the backbone of this country. Working families, the middle class, folks who built this country. We have a lot of hard work ahead, but together we're going to get our economy back on track and hang an open sign on tens of thousands of Latino-owned small businesses once again. I promise you we can do this, and we will do it, and we will do it together. God bless you all.
Thank you for joining us.